The quantum communication array hummed with an electric tension that Captain Area Chen felt deep in her bones. Outside the reinforced observation deck of Earth's orbital command center, the massive Zarkonian diplomatic carrier loomed like a crystalline nightmare against the inky blackness of space. Its fractal-like hull shifted and pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that would have driven a lesser mind to madness. Chen's fingers danced across the holographic interface, her modified neural implant parsing through decades of sinolinguistic research, first contact protocols, and her own gut instinct. The rest of the command team watched in tense silence, a collective of the world's best and brightest, representing a humanity that had spent the last decade preparing for this exact moment. Grand Diplomat Vexnar's transmission crackled to life, his voice a resonant blend of subsonic vibrations and crystalline overtones. Inhabitants of the third planet, the alien began, his universal translator rendering words that dripped with millennia of galactic superiority. You stand at the precipice of greatest opportunity. The Zarkonian Imperium extends its benevolent hand of integration. Resistance is not merely futile, it is a concept beyond your comprehension. A slight smile played across Chen's lips. Behind her, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, the team's lead synapsychologist, suppressed a chuckle. They had prepared for this moment meticulously. As Vexnar continued his pompous speech about the inevitability of Zarkonian dominance, Chen initiated protocol gesture. With a single neural command, she rerouted the communication feed, overlaying the alien's transmission with a carefully curated piece of human cultural archival footage. Suddenly, the grand diplomatic speech was interrupted by the booming voice of an old Earth comedian, George Carlin, mid-routine about human absurdity. Think of how stupid the average person is. Carlin's voice rang out, and realized that half of them are stupider than that. The command center erupted in barely contained laughter. Dr. Rodriguez's monitoring equipment showed fascinating neural spikes. The Zarkonian communication systems were experiencing something they had no protocol to process. Vexnar's transmission stuttered. The fractal patterns of the diplomatic carrier began to pulse erratically, reflecting the alien's profound confusion. Diplomatic protocols demanded gravitas, measured response, calculated intimidation. Humanity had just responded with comedy. Tactical team, status. Chen sub-vocalized through her neural link. Quantum entanglement trackers are green, responded Lieutenant Elena Petrova. We've planted 17 nanoscale tracking devices on their primary communication nodes. They'll never detect them. The comedy routine faded, replaced by a series of rapid-fire mathematical equations, complex quantum algorithms that subtly probe the alien ship's defensive systems. To the Zarkonians, it would appear as nothing more than random mathematical noise. To Chen's team, it was a comprehensive systems analysis. Transmission complete, Chen announced. Total duration, 3 minutes, 42 seconds. Maximum psychological disruption achieved. The orbital command center buzzed with a mixture of tension and barely contained excitement. They had just transformed first contact from a moment of potential subjugation into something entirely unprecedented. A declaration that humanity would not be intimidated, would not conform, and most importantly, would respond to galactic threats with its most potent weapon, unpredictability. On the massive view screen, the Zarkonian diplomatic carrier hung motionless. For the first time in their 1,000-year imperial history, the mighty Imperium found itself completely and utterly bewildered. Aboard the Zarkonian flagship Eternal Dominance, Grand Strategist Krelvac studied the transmission logs with mounting horror. The human response defied every known protocol of first contact, every strategic model in the Imperium's millennia-old database. What should have been a simple pacification mission now felt like navigating a psychological minefield. Analyze, Krelvac demanded of the ship's primary computational matrix. The holographic display flickered, then collapsed. Instead of a technical report, a series of seemingly random images began to cycle. A cat playing a keyboard, a human doing something called a moonwalk, mathematical equations that seemed to dance and transform. "Impossible," the grand strategist whispered. Meanwhile, on Earth, Major David Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, a neural interface allowing him to simultaneously monitor hundreds of communication channels. His team of psychological warfare experts represented humanity's most unconventional defense unit, a group that had spent years preparing for a scenario no one truly believed would happen. "Transmission sequence Alpha 9 initiated," Lieutenant Sarah Kim announced, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that looked more like an abstract art installation than a military control panel. The first wave of psychological warfare was simple yet devastating. The Zarkonian fleet received a continuous broadcast that mixed quantum physics lectures, heavy metal music, and clips from zombie apocalypse movies. Each transmission was carefully engineered to create maximum cognitive dissonance. In the communication center, Rodriguez explained the strategy to a group of bewildered military observers. "We're not just attacking their ships," he said, pointing to a complex neural mapping display. "We're attacking their entire cognitive framework." The 500 Zarkonian warships approached Earth's solar system with what they believed was overwhelming superiority. Each vessel represented centuries of technological advancement, weapons that could obliterate entire planetary systems with a single discharge. They expected submission, terror, capitulation. Instead, they received something entirely unexpected. The first defensive response came not from weapons, but from a swarm of modified satellites. As the alien fleet entered optimal attack range, these satellites began emitting a complex symphony of signal patterns. Some channels broadcast internet memes. Others transmitted intricate mathematical proofs. Several channels simply played recordings of human stand-up comedy. Aboard the Lid Zarkonian battlecruiser, communication systems began to experience catastrophic failures. Navigation computers started displaying what appeared to be random data, but were actually carefully constructed quantum algorithms designed to subtly destabilize their computational networks. "It's like they're fighting a war we can't even comprehend," muttered a junior Zarkonian tactical officer, watching in growing panic as their most advanced systems began to behave in ways that defied logical explanation. Rodriguez allowed himself a small smile. The first stage of their plan was working perfectly. Humanity wasn't just defending itself, it was redefining the entire concept of conflict. The modified satellites continued their assault. Each broadcast was a weapon, each transmission a calculated strike against the aliens' understanding of warfare. Memes became psychological munitions, mathematical proofs transformed into cognitive viruses. As the Zarkonian fleet hung in uncertain formation, one thing became terrifyingly clear. They were no longer dealing with a primitive species to be conquered. They were facing an entirely new form of intelligence, unpredictable, flexible, and utterly, incomprehensibly dangerous. The provocation had begun, and humanity was just getting started. Dr. Yuki Nakamura's laboratory looked more like a controlled chaos of technological cannibalism than a research facility. Captured Zarkonian technology covered every surface: energy weapons, shield generators, computational matrices that pulsed with alien consciousness. Where other scientists might have approached such advanced technology with reverence, Nakamura and her team saw something else entirely: raw potential waiting to be reimagined. "Bring me the quantum resonance capacitor," she called to her assistant, Dr. Marcus Chen. A holographic display tracked their progress, showing real-time molecular restructuring that would have been impossible just months ago. The Zarkonian energy weapon they were currently dissecting represented the pinnacle of galactic weapons technology, a device capable of destroying entire planetary shields with a single discharge. In human hands, it was becoming something else entirely. "Quantum entanglement complete," Marcus announced, his augmented reality interface dancing with complex mathematical equations. "We're ready for Phase 2. Aboard the Zarkonian observation ship, junior analyst Vrentok watched the human research facility with growing horror. What should have been a simple study of captured technology had become a nightmare of unprecedented innovation. The humans weren't just studying the alien technology. They were fundamentally reimagining it. The first hint of their capabilities came 3 weeks after the initial capture. A Zarkonian battlecruiser's advanced shield generator, a piece of technology that had remained unchanged for 7 centuries, was now unrecognizable. The humans had transformed it into an adaptive camouflage system that could bend light, electromagnetic radiation, and quantum signatures in ways that defied the Imperium's most advanced scientific understanding. "It's not just reverse engineering," Dr. Nakamura explained to a closed session of Earth's Defense Council. "We're creating something entirely new. These technologies aren't just tools. They're building blocks for an entirely different approach to technological development." The captured battlecruiser became their primary laboratory. Renamed Improvisation, the ship was a living testament to human ingenuity. Where the Zarkonians saw specialized, purpose-built systems, the human team saw modular components waiting to be reimagined. A quantum communication array became a multi-dimensional encryption system. A plasma containment unit was transformed into a localized wormhole generator. Even the ship's waste recycling system was modified into a molecular reconstruction device that could potentially create complex materials from basic atomic components. Vrentok's report to the Zarkonian High Command became increasingly frantic. "They are not merely adapting our technology," he wrote. "They are revealing the fundamental limitations in our technological paradigm. Each modification exposes weaknesses we have never acknowledged." The most terrifying development came during a routine systems test. The modified battlecruiser Improvisation demonstrated a capability that should have been impossible. It generated a localized quantum field that could simultaneously exist in multiple quantum states, effectively making the entire ship undetectable to traditional scanning methods. Dr. Nakamura allowed herself a rare smile. "Technological superiority," she told her team, "is just a failure of imagination." The Zarkonian Imperium had spent millennia perfecting their technological systems, believing they had reached the pinnacle of scientific achievement. Humanity was about to prove them catastrophically wrong. As the modified battlecruiser Improvisation prepared for its first full-scale test, something became terrifyingly clear. This was no longer about defending against an alien invasion. This was about demonstrating that human creativity was the most powerful technology in the universe. The technological pandemonium had only just begun. Intelligence officer Elena Petrova stood before a holographic display that looked more like an abstract art installation than a military strategy board. Thousands of interconnected nodes pulsed with information, each representing a carefully crafted piece of psychological warfare. "We're not just fighting a war," she told her team of linguistic experts, cultural analysts, and quantum communication specialists. "We're conducting a surgical strike on their collective consciousness." The cultural virus was unlike any weapon in galactic history. Its primary ammunition was human culture, stories, images, concepts that would systematically dismantle the Zarkonian Imperium's rigid social and military structures. In the first wave, they'd broadcast a carefully curated compilation of human underdog stories, historical documentaries mixed with fictional narratives. The story of Miyamoto Musashi, Rocky Balboa's fight against Apollo Creed, the Wright brothers' impossible dream of flight, Nelson Mandela's resistance, Stephen Hawking's scientific breakthroughs despite physical limitations. Each transmission was a quantum-encrypted signal that would penetrate the Zarkonian communication networks, bypassing their most advanced firewalls and computational defenses. Aboard the Zarkonian flagship, senior analyst Krelvax watched in growing horror as his communication systems began to behave in impossible ways. The human transmissions weren't just messages. They were living, adaptive information organisms that seemed to evolve in real time. A clip of a marathon runner crawling to the finish line began to replicate across their communication networks. The metaphor of human persistence infected their systems like a quantum virus, challenging fundamental beliefs about strength, weakness, and collective achievement. "It's not propaganda," Dr. Marcus Rodriguez explained during a classified briefing. "It's a comprehensive psychological deconstruction. We're forcing them to confront concepts that their entire civilization has systematically eliminated. The next wave was even more devastating. Human music began to infiltrate Zarkonian communication channels, not as background noise, but as a deliberate psychological weapon. Jazz improvisation demonstrated the power of individual creativity within a collective framework. Hip-hop revealed linguistic complexity and social commentary. Classical symphonies showed the intricate balance between individual instruments and collective expression. Krelvax noticed the first signs of systemic breakdown among junior officers. They began asking questions that were forbidden in Zarkonian society. What is the value of individual expression? How can weakness be a form of strength? Why do some societies celebrate failure as a path to growth? Elena Petrova's team had weaponized human cultural complexity. Each transmission was a multi-layered assault on the Imperium's understanding of civilization. Mathematical proofs danced with poetry. Scientific discoveries intertwined with personal narratives of struggle and triumph. The most insidious weapon was hope. Human stories consistently demonstrated that limitations were not barriers, but challenges to be overcome. A civilization that had never known true adversity was now confronting a culture built on resilience. Zarkonian communication networks began to fragment. Junior officers started sharing unauthorized cultural exchanges. Military protocols became contaminated with human concepts of individual agency and creative problem-solving. "We're not destroying them," Petrova told her team. "We're offering them a choice: evolve or become obsolete." As the mimetic warfare campaign reached its crescendo, the Zarkonian Imperium faced a truth more terrifying than any military threat. Humanity's most powerful weapon was its ability to imagine alternative realities. The cultural virus had been deployed, and it was spreading faster than any conventional weapon could ever dream of traveling. The war room buzzed with an energy that defied traditional military logic. A collective of hackers, linguists, psychologists, and quantum engineers moved with a synchronicity that would have been impossible just months earlier. At the center stood Dr. Aisha Patel, the mastermind behind humanity's most unconventional warfare strategy. "We're going to fight them with their own systems," she announced, her neural interface projecting a holographic map that looked more like a living, breathing organism than a traditional battle plan. The first wave of attack targeted the Zarkonian communication infrastructure. But this wasn't a simple cyber assault. Humanity's best minds had developed adaptive AI systems that were part code, part linguistic virus, part psychological construct. Lieutenant Carlos Rodriguez, a former Special Forces operator turned quantum communication specialist, monitored the initial infiltration. "We're not just breaking their systems," he explained to his team. "We're rewriting their entire understanding of communication." The AI constructs moved through Zarkonian networks like liquid mercury. Where traditional hackers would leave traces, these systems adapted, shifted, became almost sentient. They didn't just breach firewalls. They negotiated with them, learned from them, transformed them. On the Zarkonian flagship, Chief Communications Officer Vrentok watched in mounting terror as their most secure communication channels began to behave in impossible ways. Classified messages would spontaneously translate into multiple languages, each translation subtly altering the original meaning. Secure protocols twisted into complex philosophical discussions about the nature of communication itself. Dr. Patel's team had weaponized linguistic complexity. Each communication assault was a multi-layered attack that simultaneously targeted technological infrastructure and psychological frameworks. Mathematical proofs danced with poetic interpretations. Quantum algorithms spoke in metaphors. The most devastating weapon was unpredictability. A team of linguists had developed communication strategies that exploited the fundamental weaknesses in the Zarkonian hierarchical communication system. They discovered that the aliens' rigid communication protocols could be systematically destabilized by introducing concepts of individual interpretation and contextual meaning. "We're not just breaking their systems," Dr. Patel explained during a classified briefing. We're forcing them to confront the possibility that meaning is fluid, that communication is an act of creative interpretation. The unconventional battlefield expanded beyond digital space. Human agents began to infiltrate Zarkonian systems not through force, but through creative subversion. A former social media strategist became a key asset, understanding how to spread information that would create maximum psychological disruption. Lieutenant Rodriguez's team developed quantum-encrypted communication constructs that could exist in multiple states simultaneously. A single message could mean different things to different recipients, creating a communication landscape that was impossible to predict or control. The Zarkonian military leadership found themselves in an impossible situation. Their most advanced computational systems were being transformed into platforms for philosophical debate. Secure communication channels became spaces of unprecedented linguistic and psychological complexity. How do you fight an enemy? One Zarkonian strategist lamented, that turns your own communication systems into a weapon of collective reimagination. As the unconventional battlefield reached its peak, something became terrifyingly clear. Humanity was fighting a war that existed beyond traditional understanding. This wasn't just a conflict of technologies or military might. This was a war of imagination. And imagination, humanity was proving, was the most dangerous weapon in the universe. The recruitment for Earth's most ambitious infiltration mission was anything but traditional. Dr. Elena Rodriguez reviewed the personnel files, a collection of individuals who would have been dismissed as misfits in any conventional military operation. Area Chen, a former social media influencer turned quantum communication specialist. Jack Williams, an anthropological linguist with a history of living among isolated cultures. Dr. Malik Abbasi, a computational psychologist who could read social systems like most people read books. Sarah Kim, a genetic engineer with an unprecedented ability to adapt to biological systems. They weren't soldiers. They were cultural chameleons. We're not just gathering intelligence, Dr. Rodriguez explained during their final briefing. We're going to fundamentally reshape the Zarkonian understanding of themselves. The first wave of infiltration was almost comically subtle. Area Chen's background in social media became their most potent weapon. She had developed a comprehensive understanding of how information spreads, how narratives are constructed, how individual perspectives can be subtly manipulated. Her initial insertion point was a mid-level communication hub in the Zarkonian administrative sector, where traditional spies would have focused on gathering classified information. Chen began something far more intricate. She started introducing small, almost imperceptible variations in communication protocols. A report would be slightly reworded. A bureaucratic process would have an unexpected twist of interpretation. Communication channels would develop microscopic inefficiencies that would slowly, systematically undermine the Imperium's rigid hierarchical structure. Jack Williams took a different approach. His linguistic skills allowed him to not just understand the Zarkonian language, but to introduce subtle conceptual innovations. He discovered that the alien language had no words for certain human concepts: individual creativity, spontaneous collaboration, the value of failure as a learning mechanism. Where most linguists would have simply noted this difference, Williams began to systematically introduce these concepts. Each communication became a subtle linguistic virus, introducing ideas that the Zarkonian system had no framework to process. Dr. Malik Abbasi's work was perhaps the most insidious. He developed computational models that could predict and subtly influence bureaucratic decision-making, not through direct manipulation, but by introducing microscopic variations that would compound over time. A resource allocation report would have an almost imperceptible shift in priority. A military strategy document would have a nuanced reinterpretation of risk assessment. Each modification was so small that it would be dismissed as a clerical error, but over time, these errors would create systemic instability. Sarah Kim's contribution was biological and computational. She developed adaptive communication interfaces that could seamlessly integrate with Zarkonian technology. These weren't just translation devices. They were living systems that could learn, adapt, and subtly reshaped communication paradigms. The Zarkonian leadership remained unaware. Their most advanced monitoring systems saw nothing more than routine administrative variations. But beneath the surface, a comprehensive restructuring was taking place. "We're not destroying their system," Dr. Rodriguez would later explain. "We're offering them an alternative, a way of existing that they've never considered possible." As the infiltration reached its peak, the Zarkonian Imperium faced a truth more terrifying than any military threat. Humanity wasn't just fighting a war. They were conducting a systemic reimagination of what civilization could be. The infiltrators moved through the Imperium's systems like quantum ghosts, leaving no trace, changing everything. The Zarkonian High Council chamber was a monument to 1,000 years of unbroken imperial rule. Crystal spires stretched impossibly high, reflecting holographic displays that had tracked the Imperium's galactic dominance for centuries. Today, those displays told a story of unprecedented crisis. Grand Strategist Krelvac stood at the center, his crystalline exoskeleton flickering with barely contained panic. The tactical models, algorithms that had predicted galactic conflicts with near-perfect accuracy for generations, now displayed nothing but chaotic, incomprehensible patterns. "Explain," he demanded of the assembled high-level analysts. No one spoke. Captain Area Chen had orchestrated the ultimate psychological trap. The outpost they allowed the Zarkonians to capture was more than a military installation. It was a living, breathing psychological experiment designed to systematically dismantle the aliens' understanding of conflict, strategy, and existence. The strike team that boarded the seemingly abandoned human outpost found themselves in an environment that defied every known principle of military engagement. Each room was a carefully constructed cognitive landscape that challenged their fundamental perceptions. In one chamber, holographic displays showed human failures, scientific experiments that had gone catastrophically wrong, military missions that had ended in complete disaster. But instead of depicting these as moments of weakness, they were framed as critical learning experiences. Each failure was annotated with the innovations and discoveries that emerged from those seemingly total defeats. Another section contained an extensive library of human cultural artifacts, not just historical records, but art, music, literature, creative expressions that seemed to have no immediate tactical value. Zarkonian analysts found themselves inexplicably drawn to these displays, their rigid computational minds struggling to process the concept of creation for creation's sake. The central command room was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Tactical displays showed multiple, simultaneous conflict resolution strategies, where Zarkonian military doctrine demanded a single, optimized approach. These human models demonstrated hundreds of potential solutions, each adapting in real time. "They're not just fighting," whispered a junior Zarkonian analyst. "They're exploring." Krelvac felt something he had never experienced in his centuries of military service: complete and total uncertainty. The outpost's quantum communication systems began to broadcast a series of transmissions that were simultaneously a surrender, a challenge, and an invitation. Mathematical proofs danced with philosophical inquiries. Military strategies intertwined with artistic expressions of potential futures. Each Zarkonian soldier who entered the facility found their understanding of reality subtly, systematically dismantled. The traditional hierarchical structures that had defined their civilization for millennia began to crumble under the weight of human unpredictability. "We've been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding," Captain Chen had told her team during the mission preparation. "Conflict isn't about winning. It's about reimagining what's possible." The Zarkonian strike team's communication channels began to fragment. Junior officers started asking questions that were heretical in their rigid society. What if there were multiple valid approaches to a problem? What if failure was not a weakness, but a path to innovation? In the High Council chamber, the holographic displays began to change. The neat, linear projections of galactic dominance started to twist, to branch, to become something more complex, more alive. Krulvax realized the terrifying truth. Humanity had not just challenged the Zarkonian Imperium. They had offered an entirely new way of existing. And the breaking point was here. The negotiation chamber defied every known protocol of interstellar diplomacy. Where traditional meetings would have involved rigid seating arrangements and formal protocols, this space was designed as a collaborative environment. Holographic displays shifted and responded to conversational nuances. Adaptive acoustic systems allowed for multiple levels of communication to occur simultaneously. Captain Area Chen stood at the center, representing humanity not as a military force, but as a proposition of possibility. Grand Strategist Krulvax arrived with the remaining leadership of the Zarkonian Imperium, a delegation that looked more like survivors than conquerors. Their crystalline exoskeletons, once a symbol of unbreakable superiority, now seemed fragile and uncertain. "We do not seek your destruction," Chen began, her words translated through quantum communication systems that captured not just language, but intent and emotional nuance. "We offer an alternative." The proposal was radical. Humanity suggested a new model of galactic cooperation that was neither conquest nor submission, but a continuous process of mutual exploration and innovation. Where the Zarkonian Imperium saw civilization as a fixed system to be maintained, humans presented it as a dynamic, constantly evolving organism. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, the team's lead synapsychologist, had prepared a comprehensive presentation that was part scientific proposal, part philosophical manifesto. Using adaptive holographic displays, he demonstrated how different civilizations could collaborate without losing their unique identities. "Diversity is not a weakness to be eliminated," Rodriguez explained. "It's the primary mechanism of collective innovation." The Zarkonian delegation watched in stunned silence as the presentation unfolded. Mathematical models showed how civilizations that embraced complexity and uncertainty consistently outperformed those with rigid, hierarchical structures. Historical examples from human history demonstrated how seemingly catastrophic failures had led to unprecedented breakthroughs. Chen's team had prepared for this moment meticulously. They weren't just offering a peace treaty. They were presenting a complete reimagination of what civilization could be. The proposal included collaborative research initiatives that would combine Zarkonian technological precision with human creative innovation, cultural exchange programs designed to systematically break down hierarchical thinking, adaptive governance models that could respond to changing galactic conditions, shared exploration initiatives that would benefit both civilizations. Krulvax found himself experiencing emotions his species had systematically bred out of their civilization centuries ago. Uncertainty, curiosity, hope. "We have watched your civilization dismantle everything we believed about power," he said, his translation systems capturing a complexity of emotion unprecedented in Zarkonian communication. "Why? What do you gain?" Captain Chen's response was simple: "Everything." The negotiation wasn't a surrender. It wasn't a conquest. It was an invitation to reimagine the very concept of civilization. As the final agreements were drafted, something extraordinary happened. The holographic displays began to shift, not through technological manipulation, but through a genuine collaborative process. Zarkonian geometric precision merged with human creative complexity. Outside the negotiation chamber, the first joint research vessel was already being designed. Part Zarkonian engineering, part human improvisational design. A physical manifestation of the new paradigm they were creating. The universe watched. Humanity had done more than win a war. They had redefined what was possible.